Hey, welcome back to episode 3 of Lost Gold of World War II, Yamashita's Gold. And let's just get into it. And actually, they're doing more of a scientific approach this year, so it's much better. So let's see. So Levi and Geo begin to dig in the tunnel, and they find a ceramic plate. I told you this last week. It was a ceramic plate, and they smell nitroglycerin. Now, nitroglycerin is a explosive. They use it in dynamite, but they also used to use it back in the 1800s. What they used to do was put it in a bottle, and then they would shoot it from a distance, because if it shakes, it can blow up. So they would shoot it from a distance just to blow it up. So they were using this nitroglycerin. And so they left, they pulled out the plate. Actually, they call a bomb expert, I'm sorry. And so he comes in, he checks it out, and what he said is it might be a bomb over a bomb. So he checks, he goes, no, that's it. It's just a plate. And like I said last week, a lot of miners, a lot of people who work in the industry are very frugal. They will use whatever they can or whatever they need in order to not spend money. So basically, they may have found this plate or bomb and used it to dig dirt out. I'm going to say it probably was to dig dirt out or to put stuff in to carry as like a carrying bowl. He says he's going to see if there's any more booby traps. So, oh boy. So they find out it's cordite. That's the really hard rock. It's nitro, and 75 to 80 years old, and it's hard to diffuse. And I've been in caves where there have been hand grenades in there, and they've been mostly just hand grenades, but there have been other stuff I found. I found gas masks. I found horse gas masks. I found Japanese plates, Japanese coins. So some of this stuff is still left in the caves. And he's like, oh, this cave's booby trap. A lot of times there's people that go into the caves and they're reckless. They have no safety considerations. And because they have no safety considerations, there's cave-ins and people die. And when this happens, everybody says, oh, it was a booby trap. No, you got to be extremely careful. There are bombs put in the caves by the Japanese, or bombs put in the caves by other people in order to keep people out. So if you knew there was a booby trap in this area, you could avoid it when you came into the cave. If you didn't know, it would blow up and take care of business. They say there's 30 tons of bombs found annually. Still in Okinawa, there's a lot of bombs found. North and South Korea during the DMZ, there's a lot of mines that in the area. Cambodia, there's mines all over the place. So I would not doubt that 30 tons of unexploded bombs are found annually. So he says there's no detonator, no plunger, and he brings the thing out. He says it's terracotta because the Japanese did not have any metal. One thing might be interesting is when the Japanese took over a country, especially like the Philippines, which has a vast mineral deposits, they would mine for copper, steel, silver, and gold. The gold would pay for the war, while the steel and copper would be produced to make wires and bullets and stuff like that. So they really would need the mining industry. And so they call it a K9 unit. The dog goes around and just finds no bombs in the cave. So they set up a steel shaft. This is to stop a cave-in, which is very smart. A lot of people that go into the caves, like I said, do not have any protection at all, and there are a lot of cave-ins. In fact, if you do a Google search of cave-ins, Yamashita Gold, you will find a lot. It happens probably at least once or twice per month in the Philippines. So they're digging, and they found dark dirt, and he says, well, no, this is burnt wood. This is charcoal, and it's got to be, this is under the concrete. Now they're like, whoa, what's that? Because someone had to put this charcoal in. It does look odd. But remember, a lot of times the Japanese would, even the locals, Americans, whoever's living out there would have fireplaces to cook food. And a lot of times it would be under cement and going into tunnels so smoke would not come out. If smoke came out, it would give their location away. In Korea, I believe in the early about 75, 76, somewhere in that area. There, and if you go to Korea, even to today, on the DMZ, you'll see military posts where soldiers are stationed, and their job is just to make sure that there's no invasion from the north, or there's no someone trying to cross the border or whatever. Well, anyways, there was a security guard who saw smoke coming out of the jungle. So he didn't know it was a forest fire or what was going on, so he called his superior and said, hey, there's smoke coming out over here. Can we send somebody over here to check it out? So they did, and they found the smoke where the smoke was coming from. It was coming from the ground. There was nobody around, so it was coming out of a hole out of the ground, and it was fumes from a car, carbon monoxide. So they decided to dig, and when they dug, they discovered shafts all over Korea where the North was driving in these big tunnels underneath the DMZ so they could attack the South. So a lot of times they would build these small little huts, or what do you want to call it, cement things, put the charcoal in there, wood in there to cook, and so they would have a way to blow the smoke away without getting caught. So they go to the Curtis tapes, and he talks about charcoal and the different levels, and he says a lot of times there were 6 levels to reach a treasure, and he called it a jackpot chamber. And he says 7 foot would be concrete, about 10 feet would be charcoal, then glass, timber, bones, marble, and then the vault. So Curtis actually shows concrete on the video and the charcoal at 10 feet. And he said, and he did show some, talks about human bones. And he talked about people being buried alive. And Rick says, I don't want to dig up bones. Well, they're bones. I wouldn't even worry about it. The only funny thing was I picked up a piece when I was in Okinawa, and it was like a half round piece like this. When I opened up, it kind of opened up like this, and I thought it was a jaw. And I dropped and just started screaming. Then I found out it was a heel to a shoe. And so, anyways, my point is here is the Japanese wants all bones of Japanese soldiers and all relics of Japanese soldiers returned to them so they can put them in a shrine or blessing. But the families also want, if you find like a soap dish or a medal or a soup with an individual's name on it, the families would like that back to have some closure to the family member disappearing in the Philippines, during the war. So, when I was in Okinawa, that's what we did. We found a name, we would try to locate the family and give the item back to the family. Back to where they found the metal thing beeping in the jungle. Michelle's digging, and they can't find the metal object. But every time they go over, it just beeps louder and louder, so they think they're close. Michelle gets deeper and wider, then hits bedrock. She can't dig any deeper. So I'm wondering if it was actually a ton of iron in there. I know when I was in Saipan, I hit an object and wound up it was rusty metal that just was from like a bullet casing that rusted, and it was just flaking all over the place. So it was a big area, but you couldn't find it. You dig it up and scoot through it, and you wouldn't find it. But it was so full of it, the iron, that it would beep. I did find the barrel and a few other items that went with it. I just wish it was the gold, because that was the beach where the ship crashed. And so they go to the base camp and discuss the option, and the waterfall feeds the town, so they don't want to shut off the waterfall or drain it like they did last time. So they want to dig 930 feet sideways. If you read the code book, it says always dig sideways into it. And so they want to do a horizontal drill pipeline and get a borehole camera in there to see if they can find anything. So we go to Bingo. Bingo goes to talk to Brian Greenspan from the Las Vegas Sun, which is no longer in business except for a Sunday paper. And it's a Pulitzer Prize newspaper. Only publishes on Sunday. Now, according to the book, Old Soldiers Sometimes Lie, they said that when Robert Curtis went there, the newspaper reporters really thought he was telling tall tales. But the story was so astonishing, and he feared for his life that they published it, and it made a lot of headlines around the world. And that's where I started reading some of the older stories from it. I think Reader's Digest even picked up the story about Robert Curtis being almost killed in the American cemetery in Manila. And Bingo wants to see a map. He said it'd be really nice to see one. There's no evidence of Americans ever being on the property checking the cave out. But there's one thing that they're not discussing. Camp John Hay, an army base, or if you want to call it, was like a retreat, was in Baguio. So there was kind of a military post in Baguio. You have Clark, you have Subic Bay, you had San Miguel. There was a base in Manila, a Navy base in Manila that shut down in the 60s and 70s. So there was probably 5, 6, 7 military bases actually there. But by the time the bases closed, it was Clark, Olongapo, Subic Bay, and Camp John Hay up in Baguio. A lot of Filipinos were in the Navy, so getting military supplies wound up being pretty easy for Filipinos to obtain. Then you had military servicemen that could actually go on base and buy knives and buy stuff. Having one of these weapons in a cave does not exclude Americans, and it's not mysterious because Americans knew about the treasures and they searched. Bob Grisham, is it Grisham? Yeah, the guy that took the pictures of the golden Buddha statue, he was stationed in Manila, and he was part of a treasure hunting group in the United States, and he took pictures of the golden Buddha and sent them to his friends in the United States, which wound up going into the Stars and Stripes, and that really irritated Ferdinand Marcos after he stole the Buddha statue and 18 bars of gold, and arrested Roger Rojas a little bit after that, and then he found the gold. So there were Americans in the Philippines looking for treasure after the war. Bob Grisham was one of them. Brian Greenspan says that Curtis was scared to death and wanted to talk in the car. He didn't want to come in the building. This is, like I said last week on Robert Curtis, is Senator Laxalt from Nevada told Curtis to go to the press and tell everything, because that would probably be his best bet. If something happened to him after it was announced, then this whole story would be told. So he went to the Las Vegas Sun. 1978. Bob Curtis just got back from the Philippines. Rojas died just before the trial, 4 years, not 4 months, not month. Robert Curtis testified, I believe it was on video, it may have been in Hong Kong he testified, because a lot of people were afraid to go back to the Philippines at this time. Roger Rojas died from TB. His lawyer wanted to know, he wanted the medication, so he asked that the medication be sent to him by FedEx, and when the package arrived, it was empty. So there's a big mystery surrounding Roger Rojas' death. Brian Greenspan couldn't believe this story, because he was talking billions and hundreds of billions. Robert Curtis went to the Philippines in 1974 and left in 1978. And when he returned to the States, he returned in 78, and that's when he told the story. So he was only in the States a few months, and this is right after General Ver threatened to kill him. And basically what they were trying to do, and now this is going to be important, you got to remember this, Ferdinand Marcos was trying to get a hold of the maps. Robert Curtis said, if you read Gold of the Sun, which I'm sure this TV series is basing the Robert Curtis story on, is every time they found the ship, the Nanji, they said, okay, let's start digging there. Ferdinand Marcos, oh, no, we can't do that because too many people around. Let's go find another one. Robert Curtis would find another location. And then Marcos would be like, oh, no, let's not do that one. Let's go do someone else. And what Marcos was doing was he was having them find the locations and then say, no, we don't want to do it, so you can move on to the next one, so you could find the next location while you sent a crew in to get the gold. Marcos never had any maps. He was using Robert Curtis and Ben Valmores to find the locations, and then he would say he didn't want to dig there, go to another place. When they went to the other place, he would send his troops in to dig that place. so he would not have to share the wealth with them. Bob Curtis got the access to the maps from Ben Valmoris. Valmoris gave Robert Curtis 172 maps. When they took Robert Curtis to the cemetery to assassinate him, they rifled his room. They were searching for the maps. They wanted the maps. Robert Curtis had them hidden somewhere in his room. They could not find them. When Robert Curtis came back to his room, he noticed that one of the rooms near him were a group of military soldiers in full military gear with guns, rifles. And so he knew there was something wrong happening. And when he almost got assassinated, what happened was Ferdinand Marcos believed that one of the generals with Robert Curtis and General Burr, actually a colonel I believe it was, got the maps. Robert Curtis went to his room, photographed them, burnt the original maps, and left the countries with the maps, like a day or two later, with the copies of the maps. Marcos never had them, never saw them. Like I said last time, Curtis believed that if he went to the press, Ferdinand Marcos would call off the assassination hit. Now, it was supposed to be the Chicago Mafia that threatened to kill him, and it was called off. Robert Curtis was a little bit better. Bingo plays the death declaration on Robert Curtis to the reporter, and he says he got it chilled. Robert Curtis died in 2004 at 74 years old. However, his death was not revealed. I'm always 2 or 3 steps ahead of them. So they say there was a guy named Charles McDougald. I talked about him last week. I talked about him several times in the last several episodes. And they said he was close to Robert Curtis. No, he was not that close. And they said it was a place called Fort Santiago. I've talked about that too. There was a cave-in at Fort Santiago. 2 people died under Charles McDougald's watch. And they said they're going to try to find him and interview him to find out what Curtis knew. So they're trying to find out what Charles McDougald found out from Robert Curtis. Basically, Robert Curtis caught a illness and had to go into the hospital. Was almost near comatose. He was in and out of a daze. He didn't know who he was talking to. And somehow Charles McDougald finagled his way into the hospital to talk to Robert Curtis and try to find out what he could find out about the gold. Now, Charles McDougald got a doctorate or his PhD or master's degree, I can't remember exactly what, from the University of the Philippines in the 1980s, the late 1980s, after Marcos was deposed. And his thesis was Ferdinand Marcos stole money from the Philippines and did not get it from Yamashita's treasure. So while Curtis was in the hospital, Charles McDougald was in there trying to find out all the information he could get from Robert Curtis. So Bingo's going to look for him, and he's in San Francisco. San Francisco was the area that Robert Curtis was when he had to go to the hospital because he got that disease. So he's telling Bingo that he has 2 maps that he got from Marcos's office. I don't believe it. And I'll tell you why I don't believe it. 1, Marcos never had any maps. 1. 2, Charles McDougald went to the Philippines in 1988, 2 years after, or 87, 1 to 2 years after Marcos was deposed. If this is the case, the United States government sent in security forces into Malacanang Palace in order to search for anything they could get on Ferdinand Marcos. They found a safe room in Imelda's bedroom where they found documents linking all the bank accounts around the world and the foundations, and Marcos's alias and Imelda's alias, William Sanders and Jane Ryan. So they found those 2 and all the bank accounts from around the world. So if they found these and they went into Amy's office and found documents, more documents on their bank accounts from around the world, they're not going to leave 2 maps 2 years later in Ferdinand Marcos's office. I find that hard to believe. Marcos never had maps, and maps would never, ever be left for 2 years undiscovered. Unless somebody made it up. So when the cave-in happened at Fort Santiago, Charles McDougall said, "Oh, it was not my fault. Oh, it was Robert Curtis's fault. He's the one that gave me engineering maps. He's the one that gave me advice." Now this one's again, from old soldiers never die. Never lie. Sometimes lie. McDougall said he only got engineering maps from Robert Curtis and advice. And this is what he told the Senate in the Philippines when Robert Curtis had to go to the Senate and explain why there was a cave-in. Charles McDougall had political clout in the country, and he threw Robert Curtis under the bus because he did not provide safety equipment and safety issues for the people at Fort Santiago in intramurals. I was there. I happened to be there. That's the first time I ever heard of Yamashita's Gold. I'm just going to be honest. I told you several times. So we go back to the cave. They bring that bomb detection dog in, and he clears the area. Rick's like, "Oh, there was a bomb in here. So what were they trying to protect?" "Oh, I don't know. Oh, I don't know what they're going to protect." So I'm going to say they're going to talk about Charles McDougall, get in there, get some information, get some maps from McDougall, which may not be true. But then they're going to go to Benville Morris next. He's dead. He's deceased. But there is video from the National Geographic that interviewed him. There's probably video from Sterling Seagraves that interviewed him. When Robert Curtis left in 1989 or 87, the last time he was there, him and Benville Morris went to Oishi Tunnel and the Oishi Monument in Nueva Vizcaya to search. Now, isn't that strange that in Robert Curtis's book, he talks about going to Nueva Vizcaya to search? Benville Morris was from Nueva Vizcaya. Benville Morris had the maps. He talked about being in the hospital, and Charles McDougall came. And then Charles McDougall got into the accident. And now Benville Morris and him are now searching in Nueva Vizcaya together at this one place at the Oishi Temple, which they haven't searched, they haven't done anything. So I'm wondering what's next in there, because they talked about, this is in the book, I should give you the link, you can find out how they even doing the whole storyline.